What an introduction.
As well.
Goodness me. Wow. So I think it's approaching 5 o'clock. What a brilliant speaking slot. Really, really pleased about that. But I'm really happy to be here too. I do work at Wiley. Yeah, but I'm not being Wiley here. I'm being Cope. It's really important that I make that distinction. I'm sure Wiley would agree with much of what I say, maybe all of what I say, but really this is about me being Cope. I want to be really clear about that. Who's a member of Cope or works at a journal or a publisher that's a member of Cope? Wow. Who's going to look up the membership pages on Cope and decide whether they want to become a member after this presentation? Maybe some of you, I don't know. Right, so this is the title that Anthony gave me, How Publishers Should Implement Cope Aims and Guidelines. To me, that sounds like a really punchy title, and it doesn't really work from Cope's point of view. So if you'll allow, I'd like to unpack that title a little and spend some time thinking about what Cope really is, which will help really clarify what a new question or a new title might be. So I think that instead of that title, we should have a title a bit like this: What we can do together to promote integrity in research and research publication. It's really hard to disagree with that. That's really close to Cope's stated charitable mission, and I think that's more like it. So no, it's not about how publishers should implement Cope aims and guidelines. It is about how together we can promote integrity in research and research publication. So that was my first problem with the title. My second problem with the title, well, Jenny, who is the chair of Cope, summed it up well in the presentation she gave in Tokyo early this year, where she said it's not just the job of editors. The same applies to publishers. Okay? The question itself isn't big enough. If you're just thinking about one party here, it's a complex problem that multiple players need to take a part in to solve the problems. And that means publishers, journals, funders, institutions, and all of us that are committed to this enterprise. So it's kind of like this, right? If you're thinking about a stool, this is image manipulation, by the way. Can you tell? I've rubbed out some of the legs, right? If you're just thinking about publishers, then your stool isn't going to work. So you need more legs on your stool. You need Cope, perhaps, is a leg. Maybe journals are an egg. Maybe publishers, maybe funders. Maybe it's a stool with, I don't even know how many legs, right? So there you go. That's my problem with the brief that I was given. I think I've explained that Cope isn't here to tell publishers what to do, okay? I think we share an objective around improving research integrity and the integrity of the published record. Righto, so to unpack it a little bit more, let's consider how bad things really are. Pretty bad, eh? So who heard of the Liqueur paper published around about this time last year in Science? So Ken Anderson left, right? He's no longer here, damn. So Liqueur is a behavioral scientist, I think, published a study around about this time last year into opinions, how opinions of socially divisive issues, gay marriage in this instance, can be changed by face-to-face interaction with somebody, one of the players in that sort of situation. It was very high-profile research. It got all over the newspapers. And then in around about May, around about the time of the World Congress on Research Integrity, it was discovered by a whistleblower that it was all made up, entirely fabricated. And then Science did a great job of investigating and retracting the paper around about June. So, you know, there are high-profile cases of things going very wrong. Is that tip of an iceberg? Probably, and there are always going to be high-profile cases. So let's look at the baseline level of activity. This is a fellow called Grant Steen who published a paper in an open access journal that's listed in the directory of open access journals, no doubt. You've all heard of it, PLOS One, right? And this paper was published in 2013. And by looking at all of the literature on scientific misconduct, Grant Steen surmised that there is reasonable evidence that scientific misconduct is both common and underreported. I'll tell you some of the sort of numbers that he put into his paper. A survey of 2,000 psychologists estimated that the prevalence of data falsification was 9%. It's pretty high. Another paper that he included in his study looked at 3,247 scientists who were American scientists surveyed anonymously, and 1.4% of those people admitted to plagiarism. There are a whole bunch of other studies, but the biggest one that he cites is a meta-analysis of 11,647 scientists, wrapping up the results from 21 different studies, suggests that 2% of scientists had committed research fraud once in their career. So I reckon he's right. There is reasonable evidence that scientific misconduct is underreported, if you look at retractions alone. Also, this is a redrawn figure. It's not quite image manipulation, but I have to say that the original figure is a lot less clear. So if you look at the black dotted line, that's growth in numbers of papers being published. And if you look at the shape of the red line, that's the growth rate for retractions being published. So clearly something's going on here, right? We're getting better at spotting problems, perhaps. Perhaps the misconduct isn't increasing, but perhaps certainly it's not currently being reported at the rate that it's happening. Probably, though, retractions are out by a factor of 100. So I looked this up in Scopus. I hope my maths are still right. The retractions published in 2014 were 437 in total, out of around about 2.5 million papers. So the retractions are a drop in the ocean, but they're out by a large amount, I would say. Then you have people like Richard Horton saying things like this, which I've no doubt he thinks are true. Maybe they are true. This is a quote from the editorial that Richard Horton wrote after he attended the closed symposium that Irene mentioned this morning at the Wellcome Trust, all about the biggest problems that the research community that we're all facing, focusing on reproducibility and reliability of research. And he says that much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, is simply untrue. Wow, that's pretty staggering. Maybe things are really that bad. Whew. And also, maybe we misunderstand what science is all about. Maybe there isn't good, clear public understanding about how science works. Maybe there is a belief that scientific publication is the final word, is definitive, and can never be wrong, rather than being something more like a pause in the conversation for it to be continued, or rather than it being a question mark requiring further clarification. So I'd say that a challenge that we all face is helping the public to understand how science really works and what being published in a peer-reviewed journal really means. So that's restating the question. It's all about our shared enterprise in promoting research integrity. That's having a look at how bad the problem could look if you looked at the headlines and some of the papers that are in the literature. So in that context, I'd like to explain what COPE is for, in case there's any doubt. Unfortunately, COPE ends up being a stone against which people come to grind their axe. So a place of last resort when you've kicked the journal around, you've kicked the publisher around, you've tried to kick the institution around. I'll come and take it to COPE. So we deal with some really intractable, horrible, unpleasant cases. So, what is COPE for? Unfortunately, COPE is a grindstone to bring your axe to. That's a bit of a shame because it takes up a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's really, really hard work. It's like that poo we're constantly trying to shovel it out the way, okay? So what COPE actually is this, all right? Leadership, resources, and a voice about publishing ethics in the world. We are a membership organization. We are you, right? We are not a regulator. We don't tell you what to do. We work out together what to do. And when we do that, we create useful resources and places for you to solve your tricky problems. You, we, us, our tricky problems. They include the forum, Cope Forum, quarterly. Bring your tough cases and discuss them with peers. They include seminars all around the world, in partnership with publishers sometimes, in partnership with organizations like ISMTE, and also Cope runs its own seminars as well. We have digital learning, e-learning modules that members can get access to. We have an audit tool to measure your own journal's performance against and figure out where the gaps are. We have, this is new. We have a badge. Many people say they're Cope members and say that they follow Cope guidelines, but don't. Okay, they're just not members, and they might follow Cope guidelines, but they represent themselves as members. So launched maybe 2 weeks ago was a downloadable Cope logo with a membership number on it for every single journal that is a member. Now, that's new. I bet most people don't know about that, but I think it's a good thing. We also have 16 flowcharts in 6 languages, 531 cases that have been brought to forum and that show the discussion that happened at forum that you can use to solve your problems, 2 codes of conduct, 1 for journals, 1 for publishers, and a project right now to bring them together and build in institutions there as well. We have 10 guidelines right now, including guidelines for journal editors, for retractions, for peer review. Peer review ones were mentioned earlier. We have 19 currently discussion documents dealing with tricky issues like anonymous whistleblowers. I'm blowing an imaginary whistle here. Like who owns peer review. And so by being a member, the membership fees that your publisher or you pay help us to do all of that really, really good stuff. And we have 10,000 members, more than 10,000 members, as measured by journal editors right now. So that's what Cope's for, those things done by those tactics that I just explained. And really importantly, our members, I hope, will become all of the legs in the stool. So when we think about fixing the world's trickiest, most intractable, most challenging problems, it's a temptation to say, I'm going to do it on my own. I know that I can control it like that. But those kind of problems really need collaboration. So that's what I think Cope wants to be, one of the players in the solution. That's what I think Cope should ask publishers to be, one of the players in the solution. And not a regulator. We're not a regulator. Righto, so I did decide to try and answer the question that Anthony had posed. I did try and capture for you what Cope thinks good practice looks like. I did this by asking some publishers what they did. And 3 publishers of the probably 30 or 40 different publishers who are Cope members replied. So thank you to Biomed Central. Where's Chikisha? Or other Biomed Central people. Thank you. Thank you to Ubiquity Press. Tom, hi. And thank you to the American Chemical Society. Is anyone here from the ACS still? No, that's a shame. And we asked them 5 questions, and some of the answers are here for you. This is the first answer. In one slide, how publishers can promote integrity in research and research publication. These are the answers, okay? The first one's most important, dedicate people. Provide a point of contact. The second one needs explaining. Define good practice, codes, and policy. Well, of course, that means you can take them from other places like Cope, but you really need to figure out how to apply them within your own business. And then the rest of them are all there that I'm not going to read them out. So if you want to take a picture, you're very welcome. I will focus a little bit on the collaborate one. So if we're trying to be this stool and solve these tricky problems, collaboration is a requirement. And one good example of collaboration, you ready, Tom? ThinkCheckSubmit. So I think this is a great example of a way that multiple parties can come together and endorse a practical process-oriented tool rather than a blacklist. We don't really like those. A practical tool that can help authors to make the right decisions and can take the lifeblood of the predatory journals away from them. It's important to note that there are, apparently on the ThinkCheckSubmit website, are 13 partners, including only 3 publishers Biomed Central, Springer Nature, and Ubiquity. I certainly hope that's going to change. I hope COPE becomes a partner to ThinkCheckSubmit. Yeah, because I think that's a good approach to empowering authors to make the right decision. So that's some of the solutions that the publishers that we asked told us that they were taking to deal with implementing best practice. We also asked them what the challenges that they currently face are. And I'll leave this up, but I highlight adapting to new challenges and addressing the causes of the problems. Those are big challenges. And those are challenges that, certainly addressing the causes, publishers cannot address alone, so hence the stool thing again. As an example of adapting to new challenges, and perhaps even addressing the causes, there's a lot of interest right now in replicability, reproducibility of research. And so I think one of the things that publishers need to do is to help spot the new things that are happening, the new ideas to address the causes, and put their weight behind them. This is a quote from William Jacoby, who is the editor of the American Journal of Political Sciences, in a fantastic webinar, which is on the Wiley site. And he talks about the new replication standards that he's deploying at his journal at the end of an hour-long webinar, so you'll have to fast forward to the good bit. I'm not saying that the other bits are, I am, aren't I, are less good, but the bit that I'm directing to you is right at the end. Yeah, and he cites a couple of different standards. There's one called DART, and then there's the TOPS framework, I suppose, that was published, again, in Science, I think, a little while ago. So evolve and chase the solutions to the causes of the problems is what I'd say. So to wrap all of that advice up, I got this. Follow codes. Codes that many people support, but deploy them in your own setting. Empower your people. I hate the word empower, but I couldn't think of a better one. So that might mean dedicating a team, or it might mean skilling up the people that you work with. It certainly means giving them the space to do their job well. Participate, collaborate, and lead. So kind of turn up, take part, and then take a position. Recognize problems and attempt to address the causes, understanding that you're not going to be able to create the solution all on your own. There's going to be other parties that you're going to have to work with. That's cool. So, if you're thinking about addressing the causes, and if you haven't read the Nuffield Council report from last year, you should have a look at that. This is a really detailed piece of kind of qualitative research into the culture of scientific research in the UK. And for various reasons, one of the quotable quotes from the report is that scientists feel pressure to compromise on research integrity, no doubt due to the incentives that and the pressure that they're put under. So maybe there's a place for publishers in the discussion around research incentives, research metrics, and the way that researchers are encouraged to behave. So is it all bad news? No! So the vast majority of the work that we publish is work from talented and dedicated scientists. Okay, I don't know how many of you have heard of the work of Pamela Ronald from UC Davis. She's a crop scientist and published a really high-profile paper in Nature a couple of years ago about disease resistance in rice, and found out after publication that she couldn't reproduce the results. People in her lab could not make it happen again. At which point she got extremely worried and thought about not particularly her own reputation, because she's an established researcher, but more about the people who worked in her lab and about the people who are using her research to build their own research, right? So she and her lab became completely obsessed with figuring out what was wrong. She spoke with the journal editors and said, hey, we're unsure about these results. We're going to go and figure out what was wrong and we'll get back to you. They figured out that both the rice that they were using was faulty. Don't know quite what was wrong with it, but maybe the wrong gene was missing or something. They also found out that the test that they were subjecting the rice to was faulty, so faulty in many different ways. And they expended a lot of effort, a lot of research time doing exactly that. So great, right? You'd expect her then to have retracted the article, and she did. Wonderful. That's great behavior. We should encourage and celebrate that. But she went one step further. She communicated, she did extreme communication about her retraction. She really wanted to make sure that nobody was reusing her work, and held a series of public briefings that explained what went wrong and that tried to promote the fact that her results were faulty. So it isn't all bad. In fact, much of it is great, and we have examples of heroes, I suppose, like Pamela Ronald, who we can point at and say, this is great behavior. So, thank you. I hope that I've showed you what I think COPE would like publishers to do, and I hope in that long slide with the 3 columns there are ideas for those of you who need the ideas, and I hope that I've ended on a high note. It isn't all bad. Some of it, lots of it, is really great. Thank you very much.